All right, I'll start now. All right, hi everybody. Good evening, or whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. This is Tik-Tok People. L. Frank Baum is remembered today as the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and other children's books. However, his first love was not for the storytelling of the page, but for the storytelling of the stage. Throughout his adult life, he was involved in one form of theatrical production or another, from the amateur theatricals that, as a young man, he acted in under the direction of his Aunt Catherine Gray, to the plays he wrote and acted in through 1917 for the Uplifters, a social group within the Los Angeles Athletic Club. The 1913 stage musical Baum wrote, The Tik-Tok Man of Oz, fell short of the heights he foresaw for it as a children's entertainment. Baum had tasted success on the professional stage before 1913, but those successes had been due substantially to the work of others. With The Tik-Tok Man of Oz, he hoped for stage success of his own writing, one not based on another's work, one not dictated to him or heavily rewritten by anyone else. Baum's most rewarding theatrical achievement, both in terms of fame and fortune, was his stage adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, a Broadway smash in 1903. This musical extravaganza caused Baum's reputation as a playwright to eclipse for a time his reputation as an author of children's books. For the next decade, Baum strove to repeat and even surpass the success of his Broadway hit. He wrote book sequels to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz with the intention, in part, of developing them into stage musicals for Broadway. His second Oz book, The Marvelous Land of Oz, became The Wogglebug on stage in 1905. The Wogglebug was a financial and critical failure. Undaunted, Baum published a third Oz book, Ozma of Oz, in 1907, with plans to mount a stage version, but it took 6 years before the project reached the stage under its final title, The Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Through those 6 years, Baum worked on the show, writing a scenario, then at least 2 drafts of a script. Every so often, the newspapers announced an imminent production, sometimes even listing cast members, but these plans kept falling through. In June of 1912, a turning point arrived. Composer Louis F. Gottschalk read the script for The Tik-Tok Man of Oz while visiting his hometown of Los Angeles. Gottschalk had made his reputation as conductor for the 1907 American premiere of Franz Lehar's The Merry Widow on Broadway. He had also served as musical director in 1902 for Maid Marian, the sequel to the 1890 Reginald de Koven Broadway hit Robin Hood, and then musical director for Victor Herbert, one of the most celebrated American composers of the early 20th century. Gottschalk reacted enthusiastically to the Tik-Tok Man of Oz script and wrote to Baum. Baum and his wife Maud had moved permanently to Hollywood, a community of the city of Los Angeles, in 1910, but they were visiting their hometown area of Syracuse, New York at the time Gottschalk wrote his letter. When Baum returned to Hollywood and finally received the letter, Gottschalk had returned to New York City. Baum's reply chased the traveling Gottschalk, who finally received it during a return to Los Angeles, where he decided to settle permanently. The two men met in October 1912, hit it off, and agreed that Gottschalk would compose the music for The Tik-Tok Man of Oz. So began a fruitful business relationship and personal friendship between Gottschalk and Baum. They formed a 3-year partnership to write musical comedies for the theater. Their next stage musical, The Patchwork Girl of Oz, turned into a film project when they formed the Oz Film Manufacturing Company in 1914. After the Oz Film Company failed, Gottschalk continued to compose music for the lyrics Baum wrote for the annual entertainments presented by the Uplifters. Gottschalk continued to write film scores for the rest of his career. Among them are the scores for D.W. Griffith's Orphans of the Storm, the Mary Pickford version of Little Lord Fauntleroy, and Charlie Chaplin's A Woman of Paris. In late October or early November 1912, Baum and Gottschalk presented The Tik-Tok Man of Oz to Los Angeles producer Oliver Morosco. Gottschalk played what were probably preliminary portions of the score for Morosco, who agreed to produce the show while, as he later wrote, under the spell of its enchantment. Oliver Morosco had been born Oliver Mitchell in Logan, Utah, but when his divorced mother moved to San Francisco, Oliver found work under his foster father, the theatrical impresario Walter Morosco. In 1899, Oliver left San Francisco for Los Angeles with only $40 in his pocket. He worked his way up in the theatrical profession. Within a dozen years, he'd become arguably the most influential producer on the West Coast. He wrote plays, he directed for the stage, and he expanded into motion pictures. Morosco was still on his way up when he produced The Tik-Tok Man of Oz in 1913. In the 1920s, his power waned, but he was still producing stage shows when in 1945, a streetcar struck and killed him. In 1912, Morosco had never produced a musical before, but he had confidence in the Tik-Tok Man and vowed to spare no expense. Broadway in New York City was the unrivaled center of the North American theatrical world, as it remains today. The West Coast ranked as almost an afterthought in the theater world, with Los Angeles far behind San Francisco. Oliver Morosco meant to put Los Angeles on the map as a theatrical town. No nationally successful musical show had ever begun in Los Angeles. Morosco planned to initiate a full-scale production before transferring to New York City in triumph. Morosco unleashed his energy, money, and any resource necessary to make the Tik-Tok Man a success. It was the most expensive theatrical production in Los Angeles up to that time. Within a few days of signing the contract with Baum, Morosco secured a well-known comedy team to take the principal roles in the Tik-Tok Man. The popular San Francisco team of Kolb and Dill, at that time appearing in their musical In Dutch. Clarence William Kolb and Maximilian M. Dill generally played German character comedians who spoke in Dutch dialect, having modeled their act on the more famous Weber and Fields. Like many comedy teams of the time, Kolb and Dill had found their first success in vaudeville. They parlayed that success into their own long-running company in San Francisco. They made a few movies in the 19-teens. When Dill retired from the theater, Kolb went back to vaudeville, then into motion pictures for a couple decades. His movie appearances include the Five Little Peppers series of movies, After the Thin Man, His Girl Friday, the Tracy Hepburn version of Adam's Rib, and Man of a Thousand Faces. In the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, that was too soon. In the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, Kolb was slated to play Tik-Tok as a mechanical man, manufactured in Germany under pure food laws. Dill would fill the role of the Shaggy Man as a Philadelphia German. Frank Baum's new play is better than anything he has ever written, claimed Kolb. The music and song numbers are new and there is something doing every minute. By the first week of December 1912, Kolb and Dill were learning their parts and scheduled to arrive in Los Angeles for rehearsals. But for unknown reasons, Kolb and Dill did not appear in the produced show. Many of the Kolb and Dill company members had been expected to join the Tik-Tok Man cast, too. Olga Steck was receiving positive notices for her appearance in the Kolb and Dill company's In Dutch with Lon Chaney. Morosco engaged Steck for the role of Betsy in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. In mid-December 1912, Steck made newspaper headlines. She'd planned to marry Lester Matkins, a Chicago banker, but the night before the wedding, Steck was hospitalized for appendicitis. Instead of postponing the ceremony, Steck and Matkins got married in her hospital room. Steck, though unable to sit up in her hospital bed, wore her pink wedding dress while the wedding party and newspaper reporters crammed into the room and the minister read the marriage service. In early 1913, Clarence Kolb objected to Steck joining the Tik-Tok Man of Oz cast. Kolb claimed to have signed Steck to a 3-year contract and wouldn't allow her to break it. Kolb even went so far as to threaten legal action. Grudgingly, Steck bowed out of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Perhaps this conflict over Steck was the reason Kolb and Dill also departed from the cast. Or perhaps Kolb and Dill had already been ejected from the cast and looked sourly upon anyone else from their company joining the show. Steck continued her stage career with Kolb and Dill's company in San Francisco, then appeared in New York as a star in Florence Ziegfeld's Follies. Steck bore 2 sons before she divorced Matkins in 1919. One December night in 1935, in Matkins's San Francisco hotel room, Steck quarreled with Matkins about financial matters and their sons. Matkins turned away for a moment. When he turned back, Steck was gone. She'd fallen to her death out the hotel room window. The police held Matkins under suspicion of murder until an investigation concluded that Steck had committed suicide. Rumor claimed that Morosco negotiated with 2 other members of the Kolb and Dill Company, Percy Bronson, a Los Angeles theater favorite, and Bronson's vaudeville partner and later wife, Winifred Baldwin, and they might have played prominent roles in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, but neither of them ended up in the show. To replace Kolb and Dill, Morosco engaged the comedy team of James C. Morton and Frank F. Moore. In hiring Morton to play Tik-Tok and Moore to play the Shaggy Man, Morosco and Baum calculated to recapture Montgomery and Stone's magic as the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. They had reason to believe Morton and Moore might fulfill their hopes. Since at least 1907, Morton and Moore had performed an act, both in vaudeville and on Broadway, that imitated Montgomery and Stone's Tin Woodman and Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. Reviews praised their work as meritorious and claimed that it made the audience doubt if Messieurs Stone and Montgomery are not on the stage. Both Morton and Moore began their theatrical careers in vaudeville, where they formed a comedy team. After the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, they split their partnership. Morton went back to vaudeville, but Moore went into motion pictures with the Oz Film Manufacturing Company. Moore played Unc Nunkie in The Patchwork Girl of Oz and Lord Roan in The Last Egyptian, but his movie career petered out and rejoined Morton in vaudeville. Moore died in 1924. Moore went on to a Broadway career, then in the 1930s to motion pictures. He worked in short films starring the Stooges, Our Gang, and Laurel and Hardy, and can be seen in the feature My Little Chickadee with W.C. Fields. After Olga Steck declined to play Betsy in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, the 1913 newspapers predicted that Dorothy Webb would play the role of Betsy. Webb had been appearing in The Barnyard Romeo with Jefferson DeAngelis. DeAngelis, a Broadway and vaudeville star well known for his comedic turns in light opera, was also announced as a member of the cast of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. However, neither DeAngelis nor Webb appeared in the show. Morosco made a very flattering offer to one of the most popular and powerful stage directors of the day, Julian Mitchell, to direct the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Mitchell had directed Baum's earlier hit, The Wizard of Oz, and was responsible for much of its success. Since 1907, he'd been directing the annual Follies for producer Florence Ziegfeld, and by 1913 had reached the top of his career. Despite the impressive figure Morosco offered, Mitchell turned the project down. Instead, Frank M. Stammers, who frequently staged Kolb and Dill productions, accepted the job as director. He arrived from New York City in mid-February. With Stammers came 6 New York chorus girls to be in the show, casting doubt on the public assertions that the chorus would consist completely of California beauties. Singer Charita Simpson was announced for the role of Queen Anne, but never played the part. Similarly, negotiations with Broadway success Christine Nielsen, Morosco's choice for the principal female role of Betsy, failed. Director Frank Stammers had worked with a young blue-eyed actress named Lenora Navazio. Stammers recommended Navazio, and Morosco hired her to play the role of Betsy. Though Publicity often claimed Navasio was a native Italian, she was born Angela Rosa Navasio in St. Louis, Missouri, to Italian immigrant parents. She began her stage career as a dancer under Stammers' tutelage, and after the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, she continued her acting career, appearing on Broadway in The Princess Pat, Have a Heart, and The Rainbow Girl, which seems to have been her most famous role. Animal impersonator Fred Woodward, who had played both the Cowardly Lion and the frolicsome heifer Imogene in The Wizard of Oz, took the role of Hank the Mule and kept it through the entire run of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Woodward developed the part so successfully that he ended up playing Hank the Mule until the late 1940s, in vaudeville, in nightclubs around the world, and even on television. Woodward also happened to be in the cast of Mam'zelle Champagne during the performance of which unstable millionaire playboy Harry K. Thaw, the husband of model Evelyn Nesbit, shot architect Stanford White in what was then dubbed the crime of the century. Actor Charles Ruggles, who would go on to screen stardom, was engaged for the cast in late January. Morosco charged Ruggles with bringing 7 more chorus girls with him from San Francisco, where he was appearing in the Alcazar Theater's stock company. Ruggles didn't mind selecting the women, but he had no intention of chaperoning them to Los Angeles. So he sent the chorus girls on by boat, and without informing them, took the train in comfort. He arrived in Los Angeles on March 4th to begin rehearsing the part of the ugly man, whose awful appearance sends the other characters into fits of revulsion, but whose 3 words of dialogue were reputed to be the shortest important speaking part in the history of the drama. The chorus girls, who'd been obliged to suffer the sea voyage, gave Ruggles a chilly reception in Los Angeles, one of them suggesting he could play the ugly man without any makeup. By opening night, Ruggles had switched to the more substantial role of Private Files. Thomas Meighan stepped into the role of the ugly man, the brother of the Shaggy Man. I haven't been able to confirm whether this Thomas Meighan is the same as the Thomas Meighan who was a major silent screen star. It's possible they're one and the same, despite the spelling difference of their names. The Meighan of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz continued in Broadway stage roles afterward, appearing with Edward G. Robinson in Samson and Delilah in 1920, and with Alfred Lunt in The Brothers Karamazov in 1927. Baum, Gottschalk, and Morosco attended a recital by prima donna Vera Doria at the Morosco Theater. After the curtain fell, they walked backstage where they successfully engaged Mam'zelle Doria for the principal role of Princess Ozma of Roseland. Although Doria had already left the world of operetta for that of grand opera, she agreed to return to her former field for Morosco's first venture into musical theater. Doria was born Veronica Fosbury Eaton in New Zealand. She married Spanish Count Juan de la Cruz, a grand opera singer, and though she could legitimately call herself a countess, she chose not to mix her title with her stage name. Her grand opera career doesn't seem to have come to much. After the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, she appeared in supporting roles and more in motion pictures. Dolly Castles signed a contract to appear in the role of Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter. She had recently made a hit in the New York production of Franz Lehar's The Man with Three Wives. Brothers Lee and Jacob Schubert, well-known New York producers, objected to Castles leaving Broadway for the West Coast. Morosco ordered his New York manager, George Musser, to obtain Castles for the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, even if he had to abduct her. Musser unleashed 4 high-priced lawyers who convinced the Schuberts and Miss Castles that she should immediately leave for Los Angeles. "I have abducted Dolly Castles," read the telegram Musser sent to Morosco. In contrast, Ethel Pierce was glad to be cast as Flash, messenger of the Metal Monarch. Pierce was known as the shape girl of the show. That meant she was basically appearing in the show to display her shape. Pierce's real name was Ethel Conrad, and she had a secret. In 1912, She and a fellow chorus girl named Lucille Graham attempted to murder millionaire W.E.D. Stokes in New York by shooting him. Conrad and Graham were apprehended, tried, and acquitted. Conrad moved to the West Coast and changed her name. During the run of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, a newspaper reporter ferreted out the truth. Instead of trying to keep the story out of the papers, the show's clever press agent turned it into a bid for sympathy for a poor girl trying to start life anew, and gained publicity for the Tik-Tok Man of Oz at the same time. Josie Intrepidi filled the role of Queen and so forth. Intrepidi had a long and active career on the stage. She performed many roles on Broadway, usually in musicals and operettas, up through the late 1930s. Morosco engaged husband and wife team of eccentric dancers, Sammy Burns and Alice Fulton, at a salary of $600 a week. This figure was high enough to entice them away from Hammerstein's Victoria Theater in New York, where they were the hit of the show. In the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, they performed a number called The Whirlwind, which consisted of a few minutes of specialty dancing, including Burns throwing Fulton over his back, walking on her, kicking her in the shins, and daubing her with paint he wore on his arms. Well-known basso profundo Joseph C. Myron accepted the role of Ruggido, the Metal Monarch. Myron appears in photographs of the show before it opened, but shortly before opening night, he left the cast. The reason is unclear. Although Myron had been listed widely in Publicity, Morosco had for several weeks been pursuing Eugene Cowles, one of the best-known comic opera stars in the USA. Cowles replaced Joseph Myron as Ruggido, the Metal Monarch, 4 days before the show opened. Perhaps Myron's departure had something to do with the news that twice this character's biggest song number hits low D, and Mr. Cowles is one of perhaps 3 on the comic opera stage today who possesses a voice capable of singing the role. Cowles's Broadway career included creating the role of Sandor in Victor Herbert's 1898 hit, The Fortune Teller. His 1906 Victor recording of the ballad Forgotten, his own composition, remained available for more than 20 years. Forgotten was so closely associated with Cowles that he interpolated the song into the Tik-Tok Man of Oz on opening night. L. Frank Baum remained involved in casting the show. He and Gottschalk wanted the female chorus of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz to consist solely of California women in order to present brand new faces to audiences when the show traveled east, particularly to Chicago and New York. The chorus would also be unique in all its members having red hair, as Gottschalk explained. The theater-going public is tiring of blondes and brunettes. They come to the theater to be amused and see new things, and that is just what I propose to give them in The Tik-Tok Man. I am searching for auburn-haired girls, and I do not think I will have much trouble finding what I want. This story seems to have been primarily a bid for publicity. The chorus, as finally constituted, wasn't made up solely of redheads. An audition notice for chorus girls appeared in newspapers on Sunday, January 26, 1913. The next day, a mob of anywhere from 100 to 300 women showed up at Burbank Hall above the Majestic Theater. Baum and Gottschalk selected 42 of them that first day. Voice trainer Mac Ellis picked the male chorus. Audiences usually ignored chorus men in favor of chorus women, who wore beautiful costumes and displayed tights-clad legs. But the male chorus of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz turned out to be unusually strong and received praise throughout the run. Several members of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz chorus stand out. Hazel Purdy was in the cast from the opening night. She eventually played the role of Jack Rose. After the Tik-Tok Man of Oz closed, she appeared with Fred Woodward and Frank Moore in a vaudeville-style show called Fairyland Jr., which seems to have been basically a stripped-down version of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Purdy's later work included a part in Broadway's Canary Cottage. Ethel Ruff was the wife of Fred Woodward, who played Hank the Mule. She had also been a chorus member in The Wizard of Oz back in 1907. She later assisted her husband in his vaudeville Hank the Mule act, but was back on Broadway in Florence Ziegfeld's Miss 1917. She sued Woodward for divorce in 1921. The Tik-Tok Man of Oz was Todd Wright's first professional stage job. In high school in Los Angeles, Todd Wright had shown promise as an athlete. In the scholastic year of 1911 to 12, he was the star quarterback on the football team at the University of Southern California and played on both USC's baseball team and rugby team. He also captained the Southern California Athletic Club's football team. He dropped out of college and went on stage as part of the male chorus in The Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Wright later appeared as Pon in The Scarecrow of Oz, filmed by Baum's Oz Film Manufacturing Company. He appeared in Fred Woodward's Hank the Mule act in vaudeville, and he appeared on his own in vaudeville in the late teens. By 1920, he was in business selling automobile tires. In 1923, Wright skated from Los Angeles to San Francisco. It took him 96 hours. Rehearsals for the Tik-Tok Man of Oz began on February 17, 1913, in several Los Angeles locations. By March 7th, nearly the entire cast had assembled. Their number varied from 75, which was probably close to accurate, to 100, which was probably an exaggeration. Baum attended the daily rehearsals attired in a frock coat. Mr. Baum's favorite attitude, explained a newspaper article, is to stand with one hand carelessly and nonchalantly draped over the side of a piano, while his other fist is jabbed in between two buttons of the coat, thus giving the impression that he is a really, truly author. One irreverent youth yesterday morning yelped as he caught sight of Mr. Baum in his ministerial makeup, "Pipe the parson!" Intent on keeping a creative hand in his show, Baum involved himself in all its aspects. "Say," Baum gently chided Mr. Stammers as the storm scene progressed, "that raft doesn't tip properly. And listen, give us some more lightning and wind. That's it." Oliver Morosco arranged for a 3-week run in Los Angeles, another 3 weeks in San Francisco, then an all-summer run in Chicago, and finally a transfer to New York in September. Public interest in the show ran high. Word around Los Angeles predicted the Tik-Tok Man of Oz would prove a veritable knockout, and that it has success already written all over it in large gilt letters. The Tik-Tok Man of Oz opened to the public on March 31st, 1913. The packed audience reacted with enthusiasm. Reviews the next day were mainly positive, taking special note of Robert Brunton's lavish scenery and Gottschalk's sparkling music. Frank Moore as the Shaggy Man and James Morton as Tik-Tok received praise, as did Lenora Navazio as Betsy Bobbin and Dolly Castles as Polychrome. Critics raved over Fred Woodward as Hank the Mule. Baum's script was greeted lukewarmly, but dismissed as being of small impediment to the frothy spectacle that was the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Today, shows are revised, changed, and gotten into final shape during previews before their final public openings. But back then, previews as such were unknown. A show opened, and next day, the revisions, changes, and shapings began. The Tik-Tok Man of Oz's scheduled runs in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago basically functioned as previews for the planned Broadway opening. Baum, Morosco, and Stammers worked late into the night after each performance to prune the show, to cut out what didn't work, and to sharpen what did. Cast changes started as soon as the show reached San Francisco. No cast member was safe. In fact, the only principal cast member who seems not to have been considered for replacement during the entire production turned out to be Fred Woodward as Hank the Mule. Hardly surprising, since reviews tended to rave over his performance. About the time the Tik-Tok Man of Oz opened in Los Angeles, Vera Doria's mother died. Doria experienced such stress that she left the role of Ozma the Rose Princess when the show went to San Francisco. Edith Decker, known for the lead role in The Rosemaid, replaced Doria to critical success. Decker's Broadway appearances included shows written by her husband Raymond Peck. She had roles in Miss Innocence, The Vanderbilt Cup, and Havana, among others. After the Tik-Tok Man, Decker's career included He Comes Up Smiling, The Model Girl, Katinka, Two Little Girls in Blue, and her husband's Made to Love. She also raised chickens on her Long Island farm. During the Tik-Tok Man's San Francisco run, Charles Purcell replaced Charles Ruggles as Private Files. Purcell was best known for playing the title character in The Chocolate Soldier. His Broadway musical career, both before and after The Tik-Tok Man of Oz, included many operettas. In 1942, he made one motion picture, The Yanks Are Coming. After his final Broadway role in 1946's Park Avenue, he made one television appearance in 1952 on Broadway Television Theater. The first non-Gottschalk musical number entered the show in San Francisco. Morosco wanted a number to take advantage of Charles Purcell's excellent tenor voice. He turned to Victor L. Schertzinger, who had been the show's concertmaster in Los Angeles and was now musical director. When Schertzinger was 8 years old, he'd played violin with the Victor Herbert Orchestra and with the John Philip Sousa Band. After Tik-Tok Man, he composed film scores, first for Thomas Ince's Civilization. He also wrote film scripts and directed. He was nominated for a 1934 Academy Award as Best Director for One Night of Love. His best-known songs are I Remember You and Tangerine, both introduced in his final film, The Fleet's Inn. He is a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In response to Morosco's request for a new Tik-Tok song, Schertzinger submitted a lovely composition, but it needed lyrics. That night, Morosco, lying in bed beside his wife and pining for his mistress, Selma Paley, he composed a set of lyrics. The resulting song, My Wonderful Dream Girl, proved to be the show's biggest song hit. The San Francisco run turned into a critical and financial success. The newspapers predicted that the show would be ready for the most critical Chicago reviewers. Baum, Morosco, Gottschalk, and Stammers all went to Chicago with the production to continue their work on the show. But the Chicago reviews proved to be the worst that the show received during its entire run. Cast changes began immediately. Eugene Cowles gave way to John Dunsmuir in the role of Ruggido. Dunsmuir had already sung many of Cowles's roles with the Bostonians, the premier light opera company of the late 19th century. Dunsmuir continued his Broadway operatic career after appearing in Tik-Tok Man, including a 1925 London production of Frimmel's Rose-Marie, and he can be heard on the cast album of that show. And he appeared with Charles Purcell in a 1930 Broadway revival of The Chocolate Soldier. Maxine Monterey stepped into the role of Flash, the messenger of the Metal Monarch. Monterey evidently didn't make much impression. If she ever did anything else on stage, I can't find the information. A few weeks later, Monterey was gone, and Winifred Bryson took the role of Flash, one of her earliest jobs on the stage. Bryson went on to bigger things, including a motion picture career. She can be seen as Fleur-de-Lis in the 1923 version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. With her husband, Warner Baxter, she starred in the 1928 version of The Awful Truth. Morosco recognized Bryson's promise, and before she'd been even a month with the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, he took her out of the cast to feature her in a more prominent role in his play, The Elixir of Youth. With Bryson's departure, Mary Mooney took the role of Flash. Mooney had previously been in the chorus of The Boys and Betty, starring Marie Cahill. The newspapers reported that Mooney had formerly been an aide to John J. Murphy of New York City's Tenement House Commission, working with East Side children and introducing arts and crafts into summer school courses. Beatrice Michelena replaced Edith Decker as Ozma. Michelena was the daughter of opera singer Fernando Michelena and younger sister of the better-known actress Vera Michelena. Beatrice Michelena, as a child, appeared in operas her father performed in, and eventually worked her way to theatrical success in San Francisco. Her appearance as Ozma in Chicago should have been a major step forward for her, but after the Chicago run, she went back to a local opera career in San Francisco. She also appeared in several motion pictures made by her husband's San Rafael, California film company. One of her films, Salome Jane, survives. In 2002, President George W. Bush proclaimed her one of the USA's influential Latina actors. Michelena was only in the show for 4 weeks. Chicago favorite Adele Rowland took over the role of Princess Ozma. Rowland was born Adele Levi, but took the last name Rowland from the married name of her sister, who was also an actress. Rowland had a steady and successful stage career for decades. Her first husband was Charles Ruggles, who'd played Private Files in Los Angeles, but since they weren't in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz at the same time, it's doubtful they met because of the show. Rowland introduced the song Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag in the 1915 Broadway show, Her Soldier Boy, and recorded several other songs. She made a few films as well. Rowland lasted only a few weeks as Princess Ozma before Ilan Berger replaced her. Berger was born in Budapest, Hungary. She married a businessman from St. Louis, Missouri. When he died, she pursued a stage career to support herself and her 2 young children. She came to prominence on Broadway playing Masha in Oscar Strauss's The Chocolate Soldier with Charles Purcell. Purcell and Berger reunited in The Tik-Tok Man of Oz as Private Files and The Rose Princess. Eventually, Berger and Purcell got along very well because in 1917, they got married. A new call went out to summon Olga Steck for the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, but she reportedly had taken an automobile trip through Arizona and wasn't to be found. For a single evening performance, Dolly Castles left the cast and Dorothy Brenner filled the role of Polychrome. The next night, Castles was back, having been prevailed upon by Morosco to return. Brenner had appeared in a number of Broadway shows before the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. Afterward, she went into vaudeville, costumed as a youngster and singing kid songs. Brenner was selected as a chorus member for the great Sarah Bernhardt's vaudeville tour, then starred in Edgar Allan Wolf's vaudeville sketch, The Candy Counter. By 1920, Brenner billed herself in vaudeville as Lady Dainty of Songland, still touting her single night in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz as her major credit. Whirlwind dancers Sammy Burns and Alice Fulton disappeared from the Meadow Forest scene. They went back to New York to perform at Proctor's. Instead, dancers James Davis and Pearl Matthews, fresh from appearing with Eddie Foy in Over the River, scored an instant hit with their dance called Devil and the Flame. Frank Moore was out as the Shaggy Man, and popular Broadway comedian Harry Kelly was in. At nearly the same time, James Morton left the role of Tik-Tok, and vaudevillian Joseph Whitehead filled it. As a result, the comedy features of the show grew more predominant. Then Kelly and Whitehead were out. Kelly went back to a robust career on Broadway. Whitehead went back to a robust career in vaudeville, and then in motion pictures, including parts in 1913's Beau Geste and 1942's The Magnificent Ambersons. Slated to take over the Tik-Tok and Shaggy Man roles were Ralph Austin and, quote, a fellow named Smith, unquote. Austin's fame rested mostly on his star role in the 1907 extravaganza, The Top of the World. At that time, Austin had been predicted to star in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, though at that time it was still titled Ozma of Oz. Whoever Smith was remains unknown, if such a person really existed. But Austin and Smith never made it into the Tik-Tok Man cast. Instead, Morton and Moore returned from what the newspapers characterized as a brief vacation and a short respite from their work during the hot weather. Despite all these changes, the Chicago critics still weren't charmed. One of the critics complained, "What this glittering extravaganza needs is not changes in the cast, but a complete new book that contains a good joke or two." Baum returned home to Chicago soon after the Chicago opening. Baum returned home to Los Angeles soon after the Chicago opening. Morosco called in Edith Decker's husband, playwright Raymond W. Peck, as a script doctor. But nothing convinced Morosco that the show was ready for Broadway. The New York opening was postponed. The Tik-Tok Man of Oz began a tour of the Midwest. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Morosco made it clear to Baum and Gottschalk that he would not go on with the show in its present state. The men argued. Finally, while the Tik-Tok Man of Oz played a week in Indianapolis, Indiana, Baum, Gottschalk, and Morosco signed an amendment to their original contract. The amendment granted Morosco free rein to make whatever changes to the show that he desired. This concession must have been a blow to Baum. Once away from Chicago, the Tik-Tok Man of Oz gathered warm reviews nearly everywhere it went. One major reason for this was the vaudeville team of Greenwood and Grant. At the end of the Chicago run, Josie Intrepidi had given 2 weeks' notice. The show would need a new Queen Anne. Morosco had admired the performance of comedy team Charlotte Greenwood and Sidney Grant in New York. He hired Greenwood to replace Intrepidi as Queen Anne and Grant to replace Purcell as Private Files. Greenwood and Grant joined the Tik-Tok Man of Oz in Cincinnati, Ohio. Immediately, newspaper reviews singled out Greenwood as one of the show's best features. One review said, "Miss Greenwood is as ungainly as a stringless jumping jack. She waves her feet rather than kicks them when she dances. Without her, the show would have failed to be worthwhile." Another review put it more simply, "She was the whole show." With Charles Purcell's departure, Ellen Berger departed too. Gypsy Dale, recently the star of the big hit show The Pink Lady, took over the role of Princess Ozma. Gypsy Dale's career had begun on stage in London in such musical comedies as The Little Mishas and The Collegiate with Marie Dressler. After the Tik-Tok Man of Oz, her stage career continued until she deserted her husband to run away with Canadian Railroad magnate Robert C. Young. Arthur J. Blakely was promoted from an officer of the Army of Oogaboo to replace Thomas Meighan as both the Shaggy Man's brother Wiggy and the Heartless Gardener. The specialty dancers Davis and Matthews departed by mid-October. Morosco cut the number of musicians down to 6. On tour, they were augmented by the orchestras of the theaters where the show played. Victor Schertzinger returned as orchestra conductor, replacing Gottschalk, who'd conducted the Chicago run. Morosco, now unfettered by the visions of Baum and Gottschalk, still hoped to take the Tik-Tok Man of Oz to New York. By late September, director Frank Stammers was gone. George Edwin Lask joined the show for a month to restage, redirect, and rearrange everything. An announcement reached the papers that the Tik-Tok Man of Oz would close temporarily at the beginning of November after a week in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The sets and costumes would be replaced in preparation for an opening on the East Coast, possibly in New York or in Boston. But the show didn't close. It didn't head for New York either. Instead, it continued westward, detoured a few days into Canada, then swept across the Northwest to Washington State. In mid-December, Morosco put the show on hiatus for 2 weeks and called Greenwood and Grant back to Los Angeles to rehearse a new show he planned to open in January. On Christmas Day, Greenwood and Grant were back in their roles when the Tik-Tok Man of Oz resumed production in Oakland, California. But the resumption was temporary. The writing was on the wall. In January, the Tik-Tok Man of Oz returned to where it had begun, the Majestic Theater in Los Angeles. There, it closed for good on January 24th. The next day, Greenwood and Grant opened in their new musical play, Pretty Mrs. Smith, which eventually fulfilled Morosco's goal of putting a Los Angeles musical hit on Broadway. Pretty Mrs. Smith set Charlotte Greenwood's long dancing legs directly on the path to stardom. Although Greenwood wasn't the lead, her character of Letty Proudfoot proved so popular that she went on to recreate the character in several stage sequels and a movie version. Her movie career lasted for decades. Today, she's probably best remembered as Aunt Eller in the movie version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Oklahoma. For a few years, Greenwood carried her vaudeville partner, Sidney Grant, along with her to direct her trajectory towards stardom. But by 1919, they parted ways. Grant continued his stage career for 40 years more, playing so many singing, dancing juvenile roles that he was termed the oldest living juvenile extant. Fred Woodward also salvaged something of worth from the Tik-Tok Man of Oz. He turned Hank the Mule into an entire career, performing around the world until 1949. The rest of the people associated with the Tik-Tok Man of Oz went on to other things, including L. Frank Baum, who never again attempted a professional stage show. The failure of the Tik-Tok Man of Oz to reach the pinnacle of theatrical triumph disappointed Baum sharply. He had invested hard work and years of theatrical experience into ensuring that the Tik-Tok Man of Oz would be his greatest stage success. The show's early trajectory had seemed to indicate certain fulfillment of Baum's hopes, but the show faltered, achieving success only within a limited scope. Baum brooded over this. A friend speculated that Baum's disappointment in the Tik-Tok Man of Oz contributed to his early death at age 63. But that was still more than 5 years away. In the meantime, L. Frank Baum used his play, The Tik-Tok Man of Oz, as the basis for the 8th book in his highly successful and still popular Oz series, Tik-Tok of Oz, published by Riley and Britton in 1914. Baum dedicated the book to his friend and collaborator on the show, Louis F. Gottschalk. Thank you very much.
Super informative, Eric. Excellent. Just excellent.
Yeah. Cheers, Eric. That was great. Thank you.
I liked it.
You're welcome. Good.
Eric, I have a question. The Majestic Theater, was that the one in downtown on Broadway that he started that one with the Tik-Tok in Los Angeles?
I'll get back to. All right. I'm sorry. You know, I don't know which Majestic Theater in Los Angeles. So if it's still there, I don't know.
Okay.
It was the Majestic Theater in Los Angeles in 1912, 1913. It was Hamburger's Majestic Theater. Hamburger was the manager.
Yes, and that's the one I'm thinking of. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I know where that's at.
Michael has his hand up.
Eric, so you forgot to mention about the different, there's actually like a bunch of different recordings and stuff like in revivals from the Oz Club's the performance in the 80s and pretty much then there was the recordings of the camp rolls and that, and then there was your revival, and then now I'm pretty much working behind the scenes on recording, like really getting all the songs uploaded onto electronic onto YouTube with the help of this YouTuber called Sheet Music Singer. So yeah, I also wrote in the description, which I'm gonna probably send right now again. I mean, not in the subscription, I mean in the thing. And there it goes. But yeah, check it out if you want to hear more about Tik-Tok Man of Oz and whatever. So
good. I'm glad you're doing work on this show, Michael.
Eric,
Margaret has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving us such a rich picture of what the theater world was like. You know, we
I'm sorry, there's some kind of, I'm getting some kind of feedback. I'm getting some kind of recording going on at the same time, and it's hard for me to hear who's ever talking.
That seems to have got it.
Okay. Thank you for giving us such a rich picture of what the theatrical world was like at that time. We sometimes see the finished product and think, oh, that's just, they cast it and then it goes on the road. But just to understand who these people were, great research, but really gave us a very, very broad lesson in what it was like to put something like Tik-Tok together.
You're welcome. Glad you liked it.
Looks like Trish has her hand up.
Had to unmute. Okay, this particular play loaded in so many people who became famous movie stars, famous radio stars within just a few years or a decade of this play this musical making its rounds across the United States. Was this considered one of those pieces everybody wanted to get into to add to their resume? Did you see any evidence of that? Or was there just a lot of behind the scenes dramas so it spun people out and they went on back to work and just kept climbing?
I don't have a sense of people trying to get into the show. I think it was sort of on an individual basis, whether you thought this was going to be a good thing or whether you thought it was not. For instance, Dolly Castle seems to have been rather reluctant to get into the show, and certainly Julian Mitchell turned it down as a director. The sense I get from all the stuff going on with the people behind the scenes, it seems to me just a pretty standard for what shows were like during the day. Certainly Oliver Morosco was the biggest producer in Los Angeles, one of the biggest producers on the West Coast, and was making a name for himself in New York at that time. And I am sure that some people thought that attaching their trolley to his train would have been a good thing.
Yeah, I did mention, because The Chocolate Soldier came up so often as a play, a musical that actors went to and from this show, that The Chocolate Soldier was later made into a movie with Rizé Stevens, and I think it was Nelson Eddy, and guess who else? Toto. So, and it's still available if you want to search around for it.
Well, of those three names, two of them were in Oz projects. Did Nelson Eddy ever do anything with Oz?
I don't know. I haven't found him anywhere else, but he certainly was, I believe, the actor in The Chocolate Soldier. And Rizé Stevens, when she did Chocolate Soldier, was the highest paid movie actress of her time. I think she may have been the first $1 million movie actress as well.
Well, she also went on to do Journey Back to Oz.
Yeah. She was a fabulous singer, fabulous singer.
Yeah.
My late father was one of her groupies. She used to recognize him whenever he showed up.
Great.
We have about 4 minutes. Anybody else we have time for one more question if anybody has one.
How long did it take you to gather all your material to research this?
Well, I started doing the research on this show back in by 2013 for sure, because I produced a revival of it in 2014 at the 50th WinkyCon, 50th OzCon. It was still Winky, it was in transition. The name was in transition that year. So I did a lot of research then. After that production was over, I sort of had to put this away and turn my face toward other things for a while, because it was a very stressful project. But a couple years ago, I started, I thought, I should do something with the material. I wanted to bring out the script and the score that we used for the revival in 2014. And I had written a long article for the program book that same year. So this is just basically that article, but it's been greatly expanded and rewritten, and all my my minor mistakes have all been corrected. So it's been, what, 8 years? But there were a couple years there where I wasn't doing any research on it.
Tell us about the book.
Eric, another question. When are you planning on releasing the book, by the way?
I keep thinking it's going to be out in the next couple months. I thought I really wanted it out in time for this con, but it's not ready. And so now I'm saying by the end of the summer, I hope.
Hopefully it's out, at least out, either by Christmas or in 2022 if it takes longer.
Yeah, well, it's going to be 3 volumes, the script, which is done, the score, which is done, and the history, which is the one I'm still working on. This talk is drawn directly from my text for the book, but it still needs work. So,
looking forward to getting it when it does come out. So, yeah.
Great.
Great, thank you. I think it's time to bring that to a close. Thank you, Eric, for your usual detailed and research. It's appreciated as always.
You're welcome, Colin.
Erica,